I would say this, we have built a security relationship that is the strongest in decades. We need to match that with the economic relationship. We, of course, have a strong foundation, $7 trillion relationship between Europe and the United States, right? Almost 16 million jobs tied to the two economies. There's a lot to build on. But you're right, we also have some challenges ahead as we look at policies in Brussels, whether it's around the Digital Markets Act or whether it's dealing with Digital Service Act or dealing with taxes or other issues in the relationship. And of course, the Europeans have their own issues. What we have to avoid is protectionism on both sides. We have strong coordination on the unprovoked aggression of Russia into the Ukraine. We have increasing cooperation and coordination around China policy. We can build on that. But we've got to look at supply chain resiliency. We've got to look at clean energy and clean security and technology issues. And we've got to deal with the issues around data.
You speak about protectionism not being or being something that you don't want either side to really be putting out here. But one would look at something like the Inflation Reduction Act and think that that is aimed in some ways as protectionism. If there isn't a resolution sort of found on either side, the repercussions could still be quite damaging and for a long period of time, right?
Well, look, I think there are some problems with the IRA, no question about it. But it had the goal of trying to put America on the map in a real way on climate change. It also has the issue around supply chain resiliency. How do we better produce critical minerals? How do we do that with Europe? And I think there's going to be a solution, frankly, on that issue. We know that Japan and Korea and Europe have huge investments in the auto industry and in clean tech in the United States, and we want to protect and we want to support it. Let's remember, it's only 1% right here. It's a very small issue, but it's become a bigger political issue. I think we're going to get it resolved, but let's also turn our attention to what's going on in Brussels in terms of policy. We've got to pursue opportunities and not get caught up in the irritants in the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the way with diplomacy, isn't it? It feels like one of the themes that came out of the World Economic Forum, I was there myself a couple of weeks ago, is this theme of realignment, whether it was companies rethinking their supply chains, whether they were thinking their trading partners. That did emerge as one of the themes. I think the pandemic really made companies reevaluate everything from their ultimate sourcing to the final manufacturing of the products that they end up selling. And you see it across all of these different types of discussions that we've been having. But you know, when it comes to the relationship between the US and China, you are actually seeing a material impact now on trade. US imports from China have started decreasing. So how does your desire to keep the world open and trading square up with the geopolitical tensions that are at play between the US and China now, and this desire, more broadly speaking, of realignment?
Jomana, there's a lot in that question, so let me just say quickly. First, we have to make sure the United States is in the trade game, right? We haven't announced a new trade agreement in 10 years. There's been 100 trade deals inked in that period of time. So first of all, we got to have a forward-looking policy, whether it's towards Europe, whether it's in the Asia-Pacific region, which is the fastest growing region in the world. We've got to be advancing trade policies. That's why we have promoted a US-UK free trade agreement. It's why we want to see more market access in the IPAF context. But also China's important. It's a $1 trillion relationship. You're right. CEOs that I talk to are thinking about mitigating risk, right? The fallout. You've seen that already with investments in Vietnam, in Malaysia, in other parts of Southeast Asia, in Mexico, closer to home. That's going to continue. You need to diversify your supply chains, but you're not moving out of the market, China. In many sectors, it's still a very attractive market. But economic coercion coming out of China, unfair trade practices, a direction of Xi Jinping that is harming investment in that country, not just from the United States, but from Europe. That's why the alignment. We have shared values with Europe. Okay, let's ignore the geographic differences. Let's focus on the shared values and double down where we can create more opportunities. We have a huge economic partnership. Let's build on it. And I think that's the challenge for Europe and the United States to work together on that front.
How do you define the state of relations today between US and China? We did have that meeting between Biden and Xi. Was that, some people said that formed the bottom of the relationship. Since then, at least there's been some progress on the diplomacy
Well,
side.
look, I've been at this game for 30 plus years. I was there in Beijing when the deal was actually inked between the United States and China to begin China's accession to the WTO. It's how long a history I have on this deal. I think it did set the floor. The Xi-Biden meeting was very important. The tensions have been rising, but let's be honest, we have real differences on the national security front with respect to Taiwan, with respect to human rights and issues like that. At the same time, there's no way you can have China and the United States not deal with global challenges with this kind of adversarial relationship. We've got to figure out a way to deal with the climate challenge, the health challenges, and of course continue to have economic commerce where it makes sense. I think we have an opportunity. We've got a new team under Xi Jinping. We'll see how that team resets policies after the March Congress in Beijing. But the bottom line, the burden is really on China to demonstrate to the rest of the world, not just the United States, that it wants to abide by rules that are clearly established in the international system.
How does the gridlock in the U.S. Congress complicate things?
Gridlock is a choice, we say. We can avoid that. Look, the polarization in our country is a problem, right? It's certainly preventing smart policies around immigration. There's work to be done around worker shortages. We've got to deal with the debt ceiling crisis. We've got to certainly deal with permitting and more production in the United States. You can't do that without bipartisanship. So both sides of the aisle, Republicans, Democrats, they got to work together. And they got to work together to advance our economy at a time when there's a lot of economic uncertainty. We're doing better on inflation, but we still have uncertainty in our economy as we do in the world economy. So we got to overcome gridlock. We think we can do that.
So first, beat the gridlock is effectively the one plan. On the other side, then the question is, can you both, particularly with China as well, really get to an agreement that doesn't allow either side to cede their advantages? Because that's really the big thing here. So China feels as though they'd probably be ceding a lot of their advantage. It could be the same on the US side of the conversation as well. Is there a way to find a solution where both don't have to?
Well, I'm not sure economic model in China is working right now. We see the lowest growth rates in China in a long time. COVID policies had something to do with that. But China's position in the world has also struggled and suffered from its position in the Russia-Ukraine dispute, right? I think China has to step up right now. It has to make a choice. Does it want to be part of the market, the world markets, in a way that is seen as non-economic coercive policies, right? And so I think China has a choice. Does the United States and China have to frame a better relationship? Sure. It's very difficult in Washington. If you want bipartisanship, talk about China. That's one area where both Democrats and Republicans are aligned, which is, a pretty muscular position and growing, obviously, concerns about the national security challenge to China. We've got to find the right balance, but it's difficult to find the right balance if Beijing is not acting responsibly in the international system.